Ukraine in Russia, a citizen, I'm not talking about politicians, a citizen that has better life or better healthcare security, or are demographic issues solved through this? The big question about those occupations and those possible wars is that normally wars start with some kind of logic. And the country that is aggressive has to win something, some resources or some benefits that will solve their own problems. Now, neither of those problems are solved through occupation of Tskhivyali or occupation of Sukhumi or occupation of Crimea. It doesn't solve demography issue in Russia. It doesn't reform economy.
It might solve problems of pride,
which are short-term at the end of the day.
But these can also be motivations for conflict, can't they?
Yeah.
Addressing the ills of the collapse of the Soviet Union.
It's an interesting issue. I mean, the Soviet Union was collapsed through Russian initiative, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
So,
but is that the way it's seen?
They decided to come together, collapse Soviet Union. Now they think that this is a great failure. I mean, a predictable environment.
You have a very logical and reasonable argument, but what are your channels of communication to get more and more people to listen to that argument, people who matter in Moscow?
That's why we try to be very outspoken and to engage. Recently, a couple of weeks ago, we had an ambassadorial in Tbilisi, and this was the message that we tried, that I communicated to all the ambassadors around the world, and telling them that wherever they are, they have to give this message, because we have to have as many voices internationally talking about these two Russians, because we don't have diplomatic relations with them. But eventually the truth has to go to ears of ordinary Russians, of Russian politicians who think rationally. I mean, what are we winning out of this case? The occupation of Tskhivyali, occupation of Abkhazia, it is a unique war in history of humankind when you have three parties engaged and no one winning. I mean, for Georgia it was tragedy because we lost our territory. For the people there, the life became even worse. And now Russians are building barbed wires so that those people don't come and don't enjoy health care or any social security on the rest of territory of Georgia, because those people were communicating very actively. And last, I mean, what did Russian Federation benefit from those territories? We should understand that it's not only about getting on Russia today or Russian television and the Russian media necessarily. I mean, we're dealing with a very media environment. We are talking about a country that has the biggest territory in the world. Why do they need another several square?
Because Georgia is a jewel in the crown, that's right.
Well, you have to take care of the jewel.
Okay, let's open up to the... Okay, Policy-in-Chief. Questions on the floor, please. Who's got a question? Yes.
Andrew Woodhouse from the Russia-related program here at Chatham House. I wanted to ask the same question as just been asked, with a slightly different phone.
Right, the microphone coming your way, Andrew. There we go.
You've been talking very logically about the benefit or lack of benefit to Russia of what it's doing, but there is a different audience in Russia which unfortunately is in control, and that is Putin and his immediate circle. How are you going to persuade them that their actions are counterproductive and not in the interests of Russia longer term?
Well, okay, next question. I think that you are asking a question knowing that there is no direct answer to that question, but I agree with you, but why do we start talking about persuading Moscow directly? What we have to do right now, and that's what I was trying to emphasize, is we have to persuade our audience, our allies, we have to persuade other countries around the world in the truth of this argument. And we have to persuade everyone to acknowledge that Georgia is not an aggressor to Russia, but an opportunity to Russia. And we still have quite a way to go in this direction, because among European Union countries, among our allies in NATO, among our friends, still there are those questions: what is the future? of Georgia and Caucasus? Is it peaceful? Is it positive? I believe that a starting point for changing the paradigm is to acknowledge the paradigm, and the paradigm should be acknowledged by our partners. What we are facing right now is, okay, there is a crisis in Georgia, let's deal with it. In Skhivan. Okay, there is a crisis in Crimea, let's deal with it. It's like a fireman running all around trying to take care of crisis. But there should be a crafted response to the overall geopolitical attitude to the preferable interest zones.
But how can you get that?
That is not something that we are seeing among allies. They are like firemen trying to deal with crisis here, crisis there. But a unified approach which will try to be unified on the EU and NATO side.
But how can you get that when you, first of all, you have some recipients of Russian attention who are members of NATO and some who are not members of NATO. And the other point is that even when it comes to economic sanctions, we famously have divisions between the Germans, the French, and the Americans, and so on. So, and indeed this country. So, how realistically do you get that unified response?
Then we made the question, how do we convince Moscow? More easier, how we do convince Europeans? Because first we have to do this, and then we can try to convince Moscow. How do we do that? We are trying to show to our allies that dealing from time to time with crisis is bringing the security environment in Europe to a very complicated point. A complicated point which is making their lives much more problematic. Because if the theory of the privileged interest zones rolls and is effective, and if we have Russia effectively controlling the territories that it has decided it doesn't want to control 20 years ago, now they decided that they want to reassemble the Soviet Union, then Europe will get much more complicated environment. Then the projects that are developed in the Caucasus region, projects which are linked with energy security of Europe, Caspian Sea resources going into Europe through Georgia. Not only Caspian, but the eastern resources being driven to Europe and vice versa through Georgia, through Caucasus, through the new projects that are initiated. Then this is going to fail, and that is going to be a way going back to a much more complicated environment, a much more complicated security environment than it has been before. This is the message that we are trying to share with our allies. We are not a problem. If they don't take care of partnering with us, it is going to be a problem in future. We are trying to share this attitude.
Okay, there's some gentlemen with the glasses and the moustache. There we go. I mean, that's a lot of you, but actually, there we go.
No moustache, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. My eyesight. Please, go ahead.
Jonathan Steele, formerly of The Guardian. We all remember that when Mikhail Saakashvili was president, the Russians said there can be no improvement in relations with Georgia. Well, Saakashvili's gone, you've been in power for almost a year. Has anything changed for the better in your bilateral relations with Moscow? If not, why not?
Well, yes and no. We had, as always, it is with our relations with our northern neighbors, because we have a positive development on our trade agenda that has been initiated since the change of government. We developed a special format where our special envoy is talking with Russians in Prague, and they are talking about the issues that can be agreed upon, which is trade and culture, and which eventually should decrease the tension between our states and create maybe a more favorable format for discussing more complicated issues. And here we have a progress because Georgia mineral water, wine, and some of other products are back on the Russian market, and this is not only good for our economic partnership, but also good for reduction of tension. But simultaneously, the second track of building wires on Georgian territory, on the occupied territories, kidnapping people, it continues. So you have both at the same time. So, of course, those issues, those complicated issues are not solved overnight. But yes, there is a small positive development.
Presumably, Russia's sanctions, agricultural sanctions against the EU, mean that your delicious grapes and tomatoes are selling like gangbusters at the moment.
Well, I don't know.
Have you benefited at all from the sanctions?
Not yet, and I don't think that this is the format that we should pursue. I mean, our essential target was to bring back the products that were basically embargoed through the sanitary reasons on the Russian market, which is traditionally something that Russians enjoyed, Georgian wine and Georgian mineral water, and we had success in this respect. Now, Russia has made a couple of declarations that they are going to increase taxes on those products, but
as a result of the association agreement? Or?
As a result of association. Well, then we have an old-standing free trade agreement with Russia.
Okay. All right, next question. Gentleman on the phone, please.
My name's Leo Farlick, non-affiliated. Russia seems to be exploring the possibility of closer relations with China. Is this yet another complication?
Not something that we have witnessed in that sort of direct, as a direct message, but we are also exploring a closer communication. So as I have already mentioned, we are building a portion of the railway which is going eventually to connect Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey into a communications line which basically starts from China and goes to Europe. So we are also very ambitious of becoming recognized and the stable part of the Silk Road project, which now China has revamped and restarted. And I think that Georgia creates a great opportunity there because it's one of the alternative forms of transferring of the Asian resources to Europe and vice versa. So I believe that we are competing in this respect, but also we create possibilities and opportunities for Russia in this respect as well.
Okay. Next question here in the front.
Mr. President, the question is direct to you. My name is Samir Gürsa, I'm a member of Chatham House. Upon your arrival back home in Tbilisi, President Putin telephones you and says, thank you very much. I listened to your lovely speech in Chatham House in London. Let's have a chat. I invite you to Moscow. Question A, will you go? B, there, if he asks you, why do you seek protection from the West, whereas we are neighbors? We've been living together for a long time. In fact, the founder of the Soviet Union, Giorgi Stalin, was from your country. What would you say to him?
I envision this long. There's a kind of historical discussions, you know, but yes, for sure, if the issues to be discussed on the agenda go beyond Stalin, and we are talking about some real issues that we are having with Russian Federation, with our message that we cannot really understand why a strong nuclear country, neighbor, is occupying our territories, and how do we find solution out of this? For sure, I would go to Moscow or wherever those issues could be discussed. And but the assumption is that we are talking about those issues. If we talk about Stalin's childhood and the nice biography of Stalin in Georgia, I don't think that these are the issues to be discussed by presidents. But yes, if we have a vision of going out of this very complicated situation on occupied territories in Georgia, which, as I have said before, does not benefit anyone, neither people living there, no Russian Federation, no Georgia. And it's an obvious problem that we have to we have to solve, yeah, for sure, I will discuss that.
The question is, why are you seeking protection from the West?
Why are we seeking protection from the? We are trying to become a part of the world, of the civilization that we belong to. We are not trying to be on the edge of confrontation with Russia. This is one more paradigm that we try to be against, that we try to break. But Georgia is not a front line of fight with Russia. Georgia wants to become a part of the family that it essentially and eventually belongs to. We are one of the most Eastern European countries, but we have been sharing the same values with the people in Europe, with the same culture. We have a free choice on this issue. And this is not choice against Russia. Being a part of European market, being a part of NATO and stability, once more is a benefit for Russia than a threat. So we are not trying to seek protection against. We are trying to stabilize our region and to stabilize our country.
Can you see how someone in Moscow, in government, could see the expansion of NATO to include Ukraine and your country as a threat to their traditional sphere of influence?
Yes, you think I'm so naive that I couldn't...
Well, how would you... That's the question. So what's your response to that?
The whole issue is just in trying to prove and push what you believe is right and what you believe is truth. I can see all other theories about Turkey. I mean, I have witnessed a period in Georgian-Russian relations where Georgia was considered as a threat by some of Russian propaganda. Now, should everyone in the world with a little bit of rational thinking think that a 4 million person Georgia could be a threat for nuclear power? I mean, those are attitudes that we are trying to bring to a more rational discussion. Yes, someone might consider Georgia as a threat, and someone might consider Georgia as a part of the big game against Russia, but that's not how we look at this. We try to look at this as a positive factor for Russia, and we try to push this.
Okay, next question, name in the white suit at the front, please, with the microphone.
John Roberts, please.
John Roberts with Methinks. I mean, if you're going to be talking to NATO and you're considering the World Summit, what kind of cooperation with NATO do you envisage? And does this have a bearing on security of the pipelines that cross Georgia coming from Azerbaijan to Turkey and Europe?
Thank you. Well, the message that we will be having in Wales is exactly what we have been discussing before, that Georgia as a country and a country that has a special role in Caucasus is a part of European security systems. And bringing more NATO to Georgia and making this country more stable and more secure at the level that NATO can do this right now is making Europe much more secure, is making the region much more secure. Now, of course, we would shoot for membership or inviting us to membership, but we do understand that invitation for membership, but we do understand that this is a concrete environment. NATO is a military political alliance that is facing concrete realities, and the decisions out there taking much more in a complicated way. But what we are trying to give the message to our allies is that we are part of your security environment, we are part of your security systems. You have to acknowledge this, and you have to embrace Georgia much more and secure Georgia much more than what we have today. So this way, the outcome of the Wales is something that we want to see is much more stable and secure region in Georgia.
Okay, next question, gentleman over. So on your right, other side.
Thank you for So I think what we all agree with is that crisis firefighting is no way to make policy. I know that Georgia has been fairly critical of EU sanctions, the Foreign Minister. Where in Europe do you see, in the EU, which particular countries or groups of countries do you see following and pursuing the most fruitful policy towards Russia? Let's say Baltic states, Poland, Germany. Who do you tend to think is the most relevant?
So I don't think our foreign minister was very critical. She sort of analyzed the issue. But to talk about sanctions, I think the crucial part about sanctions is that they have to be sustained. And that's the whole part of the approach. When Georgia was occupied, there also were sanctions. First of all, there was an effective engagement of our Western allies, which stopped the bloodshed. There is a still active engagement of our allies for the non-recognition of the occupied territories, but the agenda has not been going further. And the sanctions and the whole case sort of went from the top of the international agenda list. The problems with sanctions are that if they fade in time, they are not effective. If they are not targeted for solutions, they are not effective. I hope that at this point, and that's the message that we are trying to say again and again and again, that those are not separate cases. Those are parts of a unified attitude to the privileged interest zones. And the whole sanction, the whole attitude should be not about concretely Lugansk or Mariupol or Tskhinvali, but about this attitude to independent nations around Russia. And this has to be crafted still, because now we are trying to link those issues together, 2008, 2014, and this doesn't go very effectively always. We have to push this message. So I think that the issue with sanctions is that they should be continuous, and they should be continuously pushing for solution and not creation of problems. And it is always very complicated. I mean, what is the end goal of those sanctions? They should be constantly, it's not only sanctions, but it's constantly keeping this on international agenda and jointly trying to say, okay, let's find a solution. But about the countries, I mean, yes, traditionally our strong allies are in Baltics, in Eastern Europe countries that have experienced and know what it means to be part of the Warsaw Pact of the Soviet bloc, how you call it. And we have strong support from our Turkish allies as well. I think that was a part of the question concerning the pipeline. We have a strong engagement of our Turkish partners, and we are very thankful to their firm support of Georgia's integration. And of course, it's linked also to new projects that we are developing together with Azerbaijan and Turkey, engaging some of gas resources, intensifying gas transfer from Azerbaijan, not only into Turkey, but through Anatolia to European markets. And I think that we have a very firm and stable Georgian-Turkish Azeri union on trying to sell this project to our European partners and to get them more engaged. And I think that that's very relevant right now when the gas issues become issues of European policy to have a little bit more diversification of the gas market in Europe, and gas security in Europe.
Let's give you a question right to the first of hands, right in the back of the room. Everyone to the back here. There we go.
Can we both have a go?
Hello, Ambassador. How are you? Yes, you can both have a go.
Hello, my name is Charlotte Talland. I'm from the Dutch Embassy. I've got a question for you. You mentioned the coordinated efforts with Ukraine. Could you elaborate a little bit on that in terms of how that's being shaped in practice?
Well, the practical part, I mean, phone calls is something that we started from, talking about phone calls. and then I had a meeting with Petro Poroshenko. We agreed that tomorrow we are going to meet. Tomorrow we are going to meet and coordinate what is our message with our allies. And the content of this communication was that we see the process as one big problem and not a fight in Mariupol or not a fight in Lugansk, but as a unified problem, and we want to ask our partners to acknowledge the problem in the same format. We support each other, and I've been expressing my support continuously to Petro Poroshenko's policy in Ukraine. We exchange information on a very short notice, and also we have sent a mission to Ukraine on a humanitarian issues, which we agreed upon actually in the phone call, and then it develops into partnerships that we can render to Ukraine. So that's the format. And tomorrow we'll have more details on how we develop our joint agenda in Wales. Okay, next question, the back.
Thank you. Donald McLaren, formerly of the British Embassy in Tbilisi, a slightly different aspect of security and stability. Georgia has come under a lot of pressure in recent months, supposedly from its friends, for daring to insist on a little bit of accountability domestically. In other words, trying to put former President Saakashvili, people like Margvelashvili and others, in a position where they have to answer for the charges against them. The West saying, no, you mustn't do this, very destabilizing, and it's only revenge justice. What on earth are you thinking of? Have you noticed any change, a slightly more intelligent approach from the West since then? After all, in standing up for accountability and proper justice, you are supposedly reinforcing Western values which you share. Has there been a change of attitude at all?
Well, thank you for that question, and there are several aspects to this question. First is that we are really very intensively looking and listening to comments from our Western partners and from our Western allies and from some of the most prominent Western politicians, and trying to understand in detail what they are talking about, though they not often they go to details of the case, but we are still very interested in what they are talking because they are our friends, our allies. Another moment is that in a democratic society, the political verdict is done only by the people and through the elections. And we have seen this verdict on the issues of Saakashvili, on the issues of UMM, and they have been put out of governance, which is a political verdict for this political power, and which ends any kind of story concerning political witch hunt. There could be questions not on political issues, but on issues of concrete cases of the criminal justice. There could be issues and questions like that. And I believe that it is responsibility of ex-president to answer those questions, not in political context, but in context of if there are any questions about criminal justice, just because he has been president of this nation for 2 times. I believe he has to, no matter how uncomfortable it is for him, he has to respect his legacy. He often says that he was one of the main constructors of contemporary Georgian statehood, of contemporary Georgian state institutions, and the prosecutor's office is a state institution, and he has to take this responsibility to the nation that he has governed for 2 terms, that he answers those charges. But once again, those charges or questions could not touch upon any political issues. Political issues are decided on elections, and that's where they end. but the criminal questions should be answered. So actually it's not the most comfortable issue for me to discuss. I'd rather discuss Georgia's economic growth, Georgia's integration into European institutions, but this is the reality that we are facing. These are the questions that opposition and the government, both of them, have to get engaged in, and further than that, those complicated issues have to bring Georgian democracy, rule of law on one side, and political freedoms on the other side to a higher level through this complicated experience. So the case is there. I, as a president and as a guarantor of the constitutional rights and freedoms, I am monitoring the case and I'm engaged in this, and I also am in an active communication with our international partners on these issues.
Okay, question over there.
Thank you very much. Elena Margvelashvili, King's College, London. I have actually one comment about your remark. There is one person who gained the points from occupation, that is President Putin and his rating. And my question is regarding the economic security of Georgia, because as you know, the previous government has given most of key sectors of economy to Russian investors, and now this might be an issue for Georgia when Russia is facing sanctions and Georgia is somehow not a problem but not a solution yet for NATO. Thank you very much.
Interesting one.
Thank you. Well, Georgia's economic development is definitely on its way, and definitely there is a high potential, but which is in a way threatened by the regional instability. Trading with, let's go from issue to issue. First of all, trading with Russia. Trading with Russia and the positive trade balance that we are now experiencing with Russia is a two-sided sword, or how you call it. You know, on one hand, we are increasing potential of trade, which is a positive thing to do. On the other hand, we are never sure when this will be stopped immediately or suddenly. But here we also look at the experience of our European partners, European nations. Baltics, Poles have been trading very actively with Russia, and from time to time they experience the same problems as we experienced, but this doesn't stop them from opportunity of trade. I mean, when I was in Riga, I believe there was some new sanctions were imposed on the trade on trade with on some agricultural products. I mean, this happens every time with European partners who trade with Russia because it's not secure. But the general policy is we still trade, and at some point those issues are solved. But of course, in a diversified market. This is one thing. The second thing is that Georgia is developing as a nation that wants to engage as many foreign investors as it is possible. And giving opportunities to everyone around, whether those are investors from Europe or whether those are investors from Russia, taking into consideration that these are not strategic areas of Georgian infrastructure, is a positive thing to do. So I think that Georgia should not present an example of closing itself for Russia, but on the other hand, we should on the opposite, create opportunities, positive opportunities for Russian business in Georgia.
Okay. Question over there, gentleman with the glasses and the red tie.
On the BBC Radio 4 Today programme this morning, a senior member of the on the BBC Radio 4 programme today, a senior member of the Conservative Party said that Britain should cease all involvement in Ukraine as it's a faraway country where we have no interests.
Sorry, I don't. Could you talk louder?
Oh, sorry again. On the BBC Radio 4 Today programme this morning, a senior member of the Conservative Party said that Britain should cease involvement in Ukraine because it's a country where it's a faraway country where we have no interests. And it's not hard to imagine that he maybe thinks the same about Georgia. I was wondering when you go around Europe, how much you encounter that sort of attitude towards Georgia and what it is that you say in response. Thank you.
Well, yeah, this is from case to case we get that attitude, we get even worse wordings from time to time about Georgia, Ukraine being Russia's backyard or something like that. But that's why the issue for us is to solve the attitude and to change the paradigm within our allies before we have a success in changing the attitude in Moscow. And I wouldn't say that this is often that I get this kind of attitude, especially, I mean, in my meetings with our Eastern European partners, we have a very firm understanding of the role of Georgia or of Ukraine in the overall security environment in the region. But, I mean, that's why we are very outspoken trying to prove that Georgia or Ukraine is a solution of the European security issues, of more secure Europe and more and a better Europe, and not only a benefit to our nations. Definitely this takes time, and definitely you will never be able to convince 100%, but we're working in this direction.
Okay, we're running out of time, I'm afraid. So I'm going to ask you all a question, if I may, if you permit me. I want to know from you, by show of hands, how many of you in the audience think that the current conflict will go in Ukraine will go beyond the eastern part of that country? Show of hands. Okay. That's about half. Not sure what to make of that. I'm in the other half. You're in the other half.
I hope that the conflict will be conserved. It will not be very fast. But
so we end on an optimistic note. I would just like to share one very important biographical detail with our guests, and that is that he famously took up knitting in order to quit smoking. Did it work?
I have now two worst habits at the same time. I'm smoking and
okay. So I leave you with one abiding image, and that is a picture ruling the Kremlin. There are two gentlemen sitting there. One is you, and the other one is Vladimir Putin. And you are busy knitting and looking at them. I think that could be the solution to all sorts of issues.
it depends what he is doing.